February 20th all-member Poverty and Homelessness Board meeting. And before we get started today, I want to thank everybody for coming. We're going to do roll call today so that everybody knows who are the members of the board. And then for the agenda, we'll have public comment, the COC award discussion with Amanda, the severe weather response update from James, an update on the co-chair nominations, strategic plan with James, the committee updates, if everybody remembers, they were in the packet because now we have everybody sending updates through the packet. And so I'll have that section open for if people have questions about the updates or comments, and then we'll wrap up. All right. So to get started, my name is Sean Murphy, and I am the chair.
Pat Farr, Board of County Commissioners. I serve as the one of the co-chairs, co-vice chairs, excuse me.
Jack Boyson with St. Vincent de Paul, not a voting member.
Amanda Borda, Senior Program Services Coordinator with Lane County Human Services Division and COC staff.
Sheila Wegner, I'm with the Oregon Department of Human Services, and I'm a non-voting member.
Matthias Smith, Youth Representative.
I'm James Yu, I'm the Homelessness and Community Action Manager, Lane County staff.
I'm going to turn it over to Carly to help us with the online members. Okay, Carly, my glasses are not doing well, so if you're gonna, if you can help me today. Okay.
Looks like we have Debbie.
Okay, Debbie, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Debbie Farr, she, her pronouns. I'm the Community Outreach and Engagement Manager for Trillium Community Health Plan CCO.
Okay. Mayor Van Gordon? I just stepped away, or we'll come back. And Heather?
Hi all, Heather Quasanza, Director of Philanthropy with Community Supported Shelters, she, her pronouns, voting board member.
And Mike Fleck?
Hi, Mike Fleck. I'm a sector representative on the PHB. I work at Community Sharing in Cottage Grove.
Did we miss anyone? No? Okay, so before we open it for public comment, I do want to put out there, we have a big section today on the strategic plan. I think the entire community is really wanting us to focus and get something out so that everybody can get to work. And so I'm just asking everyone on the board if we can really stay focused today on what we need to put in the strategic plan and how we can focus on moving forward and improving the system. Because we all recognize that there are significant, big, huge gaps and barriers with what we have, but we need that strategic plan to tell us what needs to go into place and to get that created so we can all get to work. And then also with that, before we open it for public comment, the chat box will be closed. I'll have Carly monitoring it for members who are putting information in the chat. Okay. Glenn, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, good afternoon, you guys. Sorry, but I had a slight emergency here at the center, as we know how these shelters get. My name is Glenn Porter. I'm the project director with Equitable Social Solutions, overseeing the shelters here in Lane County and supporting with the all-in housing programs.
Thank you. And with that, we will open it up for public comment. Mayor, we'll have you introduce yourself, and while we wait for that last bit to see if anybody wants to make a public comment.
Sean Van Gordon, Mayor of Springfield, and I will be hopefully getting on my PC shortly. So, thank you.
With that, then we will close public comment. Oh. Chris just, oh, okay. Go ahead. Chris?
Hello, everybody. Chris McAllister from Springfield. I'm a lived experience seat, and I just want to really implore people to try and get services to folks who are serving the fallen. We've had several deaths lately, and there's not much access when we try to access the mental health mobile crisis. After hours, there were issues with that. And so I really feel like we need to test out our systems and find alternatives, especially if we have examples where people from outside our community are fielding calls, or if there is a tie to law enforcement to the access to mental health care. A lot of volunteers are being asked to do free work in terms of mental health, non-supported needs, and clients and guests are asking for help, and there's nowhere for them to go. It's first come, first serve for a lot of it. And ever since we've moved to a different model from the old cahoots, we feel like it's harder to get help than ever before. I yield.
Thank you, Chris. And I know, because I said with transparency, PHB will focus on what we have power on, which is definitely incorporating in the strategic plan the need for additional mental health services. I think or behavioral health in general, that as a community, we know that we're struggling with that. And then I also want to turn to Commissioner Farr, because I think you are on the Mental Health Advisory Council as well, which specifically focuses on mental health issues.
Absolutely. I'm a non-voting member, chair of the Mental Health Advisory Committee. I've been on that for, I'm in my 13th year. We met yesterday. It's a very strong, I'd love to say opinionated, and very forthright committee. They cover a broad range of issues. Yesterday they were working on the community health survey, and a lot of very pointed discussion occurred at Mental Health Advisory. What they do then is they make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners, and we have unanimously never said no to any recommendations that they make, wisely on our part. So.
And I know that is open to the public as well, right?
It is.
Do you know what a date and time?
It was yesterday the third Wednesday of the month. It's whatever yesterday was. That.
Don't look at me.
The third Wednesday of the month at 2:30, and we do invite public comment. It's also the local drug and alcohol policy committee. It serves two functions, and has recently been added a third function, which is the developmentally disabled advisory committee. So it wears a lot of hats, but those hats really merge into a common purpose.
Thank you so much. With that, we will move forward with the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
A motion.
Thank you. So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
Chair, confirmation, do we have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Charlie, you'll let me know. I'm sorry, I will not wear these glasses again, but they do not have the anti-glare, so every time I look up, the light is shining bright. Nothing for discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
On the screen, can we get ayes?
Aye.
Glenn Porter, aye.
Aye.
Mayor Knutson, aye.
Aye. Chris McAllister.
Mike Fleck, aye.
Heather Quasanza, aye.
pretty sure that's a unanimous vote, so it passes. Okay. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Amanda.
Thank you. So I'll just give a quick update on our Continuum of Care awards. You all should have received this information through email on January 17th or around that date. So if you did not receive that, let me know. But just to share that we did receive on January 17th the fiscal year 24 HUD Continuum of Care awards. And that's for that application that we submitted late last year. So we did receive $7,274,615. That is about a $586,000 increase from the previous HUD fiscal year. And that primarily funds our continuum permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, our youth homelessness demonstration program projects, as well as our HMIS and our COC planning. So all of those were continuing grants that we already have, our renewals. We did not receive our additional bonus projects that we submitted. However, we did receive some expansion funding that we submitted that was submitted based on reallocated funding from a project that, as you remember, the Vet Lift project decided not to continue, and so we reallocated that money. So we did receive that expansion for the Connections Rapid Rehousing project, as well as additional funding for our homeless management information system. And so we received those awards on January 17th, and as you know, as of the end of January, we do have a new federal administration that came in, and so the status of these awards is the same as it has been in previous years. We don't typically receive grant agreements right away. It usually takes a couple months. Last year, we started to hear from our local HUD field office in April. So right now, we're just continuing operating the fiscal year 23 grants. Most are still in that grant period. And we will await grant agreements from HUD. I do want to share that this year, obviously, as many of you know, the administration has made it clear that they are reviewing all current grants and funding for alignment with their current policy priorities and ensuring they're reducing fraud, waste, and abuse. And so that's sort of where we are right now. We don't know anything further than what you all would have heard. HUD has not communicated anything to us directly about either what is being reviewed or what may change with the Continuum of Care grants. And so right now we don't know of any impact on fiscal year 24 awards and are just sort of business as usual, but also with caution and understanding that we may hear of changes in the coming months, and we'll just continue to monitor sort of what's happening with HUD and where the direction is going with this current administration. So no cause for concern in this very moment. We're still just awaiting grant agreements. I think if we don't hear back in a few months, then we would have a discussion of sort of what the next steps are, or if we hear that there will be a change in Continuum of Care funding, we'll certainly inform the board of any changes we hear about. Any questions about the awards or sort of status?
Okay. Thank you, Amanda. I know everybody's on pins and needles, so. And not broad sectors, not just housing, so, because that not only does it impact what we're doing now, but also as we're working on the strategic plan and we're looking at the things that we're incorporating in that strategic plan, federal funding is a heavy factor in us being able to achieve those outcomes, so.
And if I may say, Chair, that Amanda was very calm in your statement, but your statement represents a great deal of concern regarding where we may be going, because we have programs in place that people are relying on. It's a strict process that we've gone through throughout the years. It's not wasteful. It's not undeliberative, and we're hoping that we're able to continue in the direction that we've historically continued. And let's presume that until. And thank you for that excellent report, Amanda, and thank you for keeping the temperature down.
I'll just keep it internal for now. I will say that it's a good time for advocacy at the federal level and at the state level to contact legislators and make sure that they know how important this funding is, what the impact of it is, who it's serving, and what sort of impact it would have if that funding were to decrease or discontinue in any way. And so I know the National Alliance is pushing for that, and a lot of COCs have contacted their legislators, and they're getting that message that we do want to know what's happening with this funding and want to feel secure that it's continuing as we have in the past. So encourage everyone to continue with that advocacy.
I think from all of us on the PHB, if there's anything that we can do as regards of letters from the PHB. Everybody's shaking their head that we are more than happy. All right, thank you, Amanda. And I'm going to pass it on to James, who's going to give us the severe weather response update.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I want to make sure this mic is not too far, too close. Thank you. So as we look to a forecast that is looking like we're likely to be out of the winter cold weather, just wanted to give a summary regarding our severe weather response this winter, some updates, some changes that were made this year, and just a full recognition that as we're not out of a severe weather response just because we're moving out of the winter. I think we all know we live in a environment where severe weather can come year round. So this is not saying that we are done with our severe weather response. It's just looking back at the winter. Want to start by just an acknowledgement of all of the volunteers, staff, providers that were involved in the winter response this year. The back-to-back days, the long stretches, I know were incredibly taxing. Jack and I have been in contact and extend thanks to Jack's team. Lori, I know you're on the call and would say the same to Catholic Community Services. And again, just to all the volunteers that helped to make Egan activations happen this year. It was a challenging year, I know. So looking at the data from this year, Egan activated a total of 23 nights, operating out of 6 different locations. I do want to highlight that they were, St. Vinny's was excellent in being able to pivot quickly. One of the activation weeks when the fairgrounds was not available and were able to move to their warehouse space to open. So just an appreciation for that quick pivot there. Egan served a total of 1,531 individuals for a total of 7,160 nights of sheltering. This year, in addition to Egan, St. Vinny's also operated their extreme weather emergency shelters. Those, I'm going to get into the activation criteria on another slide, but those were shelters that were activated with St. Vincent de Paul staff when conditions were still dangerous, but were outside of the Egan threshold. Those shelters opened a total of 3 nights, operating out of 2 locations, serving a total of 354 individuals for a total of 426 total nights of sheltering. And then our Catholic Community Services Extreme Weather Sheltering Program that utilizes hotels to shelter families. They did sheltering a total of 47 nights, serving 253 individuals, again, that were comprised in households with children. Additionally, this year, other warming shelter operations across the county, we had Cottage Grove's Community Sharing stepped up and did cold weather sheltering this year. The Eugene Mission operating under their inclement weather policy, the Florence Emergency Cold Weather Shelter, the Veneta Warm Center, and the Oak Ridge Warming Center. Next slide, please. So new this year, and I know much of this has been discussed with this board previously when I believe Tim Black had presented to the group earlier in the fall, but wanted to highlight too just the partnership. St. Vinny's and Community Sharing, Mike down in Cottage Grove, were able to partner this year to make sure that warming shelter efforts continued in the Cottage Grove area. As I mentioned, the extreme weather emergency shelter operated by St. Vincent de Paul. As you can see, the activation criteria for that sheltering was the 3rd night of temperatures being at 30 degrees or below. Jack, also, if I get any of this wrong, please feel free to interject. New this year was the ability for St. Vinny's to pay lead staff at their Egan site. So there were dedicated lead staff that were paid staff at those sites. Additionally, able to purchase a shuttle bus to help with transportation, with getting folks to and then from sheltering. This year, we also saw 211 be activated statewide through ORM, the Oregon Emergency Management. hoping, I'm sure Kate will put the acronym in the chat to correct me, to help supporting getting folks to cold weather sheltering via the use of Lyft. And then I did just want to highlight, which I think was a result of the hot wash or the debriefing that occurred since last year's ice storm. I saw a much more proactive response this year. So as we were looking to the February storm that, thankfully didn't end up as severe as I think was anticipated, there was a real concerted effort amongst all the municipalities, county providers to get together and plan in advance of that. So there was an emergency management co-operators call the week before, building up to the storm, and then during, just to monitor and ensure that steps were being taken as was necessary. Again, thankful the storm didn't end up as severe as the previous years, but really just a high end. Thank you, Maria. Really just want to highlight that those preventative and preemptive measures being taken as we move into these events is going to be really important. But again, just a major thanks to all those involved in ensuring severe weather response, and again recognizing we're continuing these efforts throughout the year. This is just probably likely the end of the winter activations due to the temperatures. Jack, feel free, or Lori, if there's anything you want to add, or any questions folks have.
I'll add, thank you to the county and your amazing team. There was a lot of pivoting this year, and it was great that we got to continue services throughout every night that it was really needed with the temperatures. One thing we got to try out a lot of things this year, and it was great to work with the county and to kind of talk about what was working, what wasn't. One of the things we tried out was the shuttles, and we ended up picking up and serving hundreds of individuals every night with the shuttles. And so that was a huge success, and we got to work hand in hand with Cahoots as well as emergency services. So it was exciting to try a lot of new things, and thank you to the county.
Well, it's a daunting effort that is undertaken every year, and every year it feels more daunting. A question that I've always had is, we activate at, what is the temperature we activate, Egan, at?
We activate at 29, so under 30.
Under 30. I don't have that question every year. That's been fairly steady, but a lot of folks wonder about pretty ratty weather that's higher than 29. If it's 32 degrees and sleeting, feels a lot worse than 29 and clear. And I don't know at what level we continue a discussion on what would it take, because every degree up you go, it increases the volunteer effort. I'd say exponentially. It's not quite exponentially, but it feels it. Yeah. If we do go into that discussion between now and next winter, we're going to with our eyes wide open. It's not just a flick of the switch to throw the centers open for an extra degree. Thank you. Yeah.
And I see.
I would like to add too that CCS could not have sheltered all of the families in motels that we did without additional funding that we received this year to do that. And a big kudos to Lane Community Health District for their funding assistance and some new funds that came through county as well. So we're happy to do this work, but we couldn't do it without this additional funding that came through this year.
Chris?
Thank you, St. Vinny's and Catholic Community Services, for your efforts trying to tackle weather in different ways. I was curious, knowing that the previous slides said that there were 3 nights of the emergency shelter, and knowing that the death I mentioned earlier happened with snow on the ground. How did we determine when those would be activated or should be activated?
So that was actually to kind of also respond to Commissioner Farr's. It's a tough decision. The idea was that if it was below 32 degrees, so in between that 32 to 29 degrees, as well as wet and snowing, and it's hard because setting up any shelter takes time. It's hard to do it same day. And so that the very unfortunate death of the individual near the memorial building we had made the decision that it was not going to be above 30, it was not going to be below 31 degrees. And after having multiple nights of activating in a row and having staff burnout, we just weren't able to find the space and find the time. And so the really unfortunate thing is that that night ended up being 32 degrees exactly. So it was, in terms of we were just looking at the temperature, it was, we were correct in not opening temperature-wise, but it's one of those that just, it creates difficult questions. And I think for us and our team, it was a reminder of how important it is, the impact done when we open. Yeah.
Mayor Van Gordon?
Thank you. Thank you for the great work. The question that I think I had was along, Commissioner Farr's comment, and then is there room to really have a conversation to give St. Vinny's more flexibility in the range of when, we're at a weather event or there's snow on the ground or some combination of things to say maybe you don't have to hit exactly 29 degrees, but there's another combination that will allow you to open. And it sounds like would be a valuable conversation.
Yeah, I would say those conversations have been happening, on an ongoing basis, and we met with St. Vincent de Paul this year before the season began, and I think we saw some improvements this year. Like I said, the ability to have some paid staff, some additional shuttling, but yeah, there's a lot more that needs to be done to be able to meet the need that exists, especially in an ever-changing climate, and those conversations continue with St. Vinny's, and I know, they have a lot of creative ideas for the future, and we hope that we can pair funding with that to be able to move those efforts forward.
And I think that's where my head is. I would still be curious to, how those conversations played out, knowing that, just a wholesale movement off of 29 degrees would be a substantial increase of nights and resources, et cetera. But maybe we can, be, provide for some more operational flexibility, especially if we've got all summer to sort of chat about it. And I do just want to make a quick comment. I acknowledge that there was a death in Springfield last week outside of Eagan on the 14th. So I think it was Friday. Obviously, anytime somebody passes away on the streets, right, that it is a tragedy, and everybody every human has dignity in our society just because they're human. I do want to just note, I did get an update from the city manager today, and the investigation is still ongoing, and it's going to be probably 6 months before they get, the final results back, right? So especially as we're talking about winter weather specifically, and specifically since there was snow on the ground, I would just add some caution that it is still an open and sort of active investigation. That's all I had.
Thank you. And with that, because we did go a little bit over, I am going to say really quickly with wait, did you still have another slide? No. Okay, good. Okay. I'm going to say really quickly with the chair nominations that we have myself for chair. I don't think anybody else, are you sure? Nobody else wants to step up to be chair.
Is anybody not here?
And then we also have Heather, Mateus, and Pat for co-chairs. So what we are going to do so that we don't put people on the spot and take up a lot of time that we could use for the strategic plan discussion today, is we are going to send out an electronic vote, which will have all of us on it. And then you can check for your votes, and then we will bring it back at the March meeting. And all that I do ask is please don't write in other, so that when I come back in March, Bugs Bunny is chairing the PHB or something, so. Because we got work to do, so. All right, and with that, I'm gonna, any questions before we move on to the strategic plan? Okay, all right. Go ahead, James, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, sorry you all have to hear me talk quite a bit today. I'll try to move us through this first phase quickly. So the work group convened last Friday, the subgroup of the PHB. We also were able to invite all league members to attend, and we had great attendance and participation from league. So it was a good group that took a look at kind of the meat of the strategic plan draft that we've been provided. Just to give a little bit of context as to what has led us to where we're at and why we're going through this process. Perhaps most importantly, having a strategic plan is a requirement of a continuum of care. And the strategic plan is what's going to help guide and set the funding and implementation priorities for a variety of programs that are funded by the 4 areas that are listed above. As I'm sure most of you also know, the PHB has not had an updated strategic plan since fiscal year 22-23. So, desperately in need of a current plan to help guide us as we move into the future. In doing the strategic planning work, I've heard Brittany Manzo, the consultant we've worked with, say, several times that it's really progress over perfection. So recognizing that as a board, moving forward with a set of goals and having those goals outlined is incredibly important. And it may be, an ongoing work in progress. So I forgot to delete part of that slide from the work group. We're not going to be spending 10 minutes on each section. That was from the work group. But just that was the context that was given to the work group is let's look at each of these sections relatively quickly and get some initial thoughts with the understanding that the goal is really to just move us forward. Next slide, please. So I also recognize these slides are messy. As for those of you who have taken a look at the strategic plan draft that was included in the packet, there's a lot of content, a lot of great content and information there, and so fitting them onto PowerPoint slides has been a challenge. But the work group really, as I said, focused on kind of looking at the meat of the plan. So looking at the outcomes, the objectives, and then the 4 core areas of work that were identified in the plan. And then also just talking about more broadly what was missing from the plan. So in looking at the proposed outcomes, which are there on the left, these are the outcomes that were put in the plan. Specifically, a lot of discussion around looking at those numeric goals that were set. So 800 new permanent supportive housing units, 1,700 new and sustained shelter and temporary housing units, and then 2,500 new housing assistance opportunities. So as the work group discussed these outcomes, there was curiosity and interest in just kind of understanding the methodology that was used by Brittany when pulling these outcomes. Was it tied to kind of any NAEH best practices that were identified in the system design clinic work? Was it related to housing inventory, et cetera? I haven't had a chance to connect with Brittany to fully suss out what methodology was used, but it was noted by the work group that having that context would be helpful. Additionally, the work group talked about making bullet number 3, so the creating a pipeline of diverse approaches to increase local investments, wanting to pull out what those diverse approaches may be. The work group talked a lot about, the unknowns of the federal funding landscape and wanting to be clear about where this board would look for potential funding opportunities, especially if the federal funding were to go away. And then again, just wanting understanding of where that 56 million number, where the methodology that specific number was pulled from. Group also talked about seeking some clarification around whether those 1,700 units are all new units that will then be sustained, or if that's a mix of sustaining some of the current units that we have in our system and then creating new ones, and just more clarity, more detail in understanding kind of where each of those subheadings, how many units each of those will represent. And then a conversation about just sheltering language, ensuring that everyone is using the same kind of understanding of shelter and the same definitions. And so feeling like it may be necessary to pull out in a little bit more detail what we mean by shelter and how it fits into the larger system. And then a question about, are these outcomes that reflect interventions that are going to be the most sustainable financially and are what are most needed by our system, and really a focus on tying the best possible outcomes for the people that are being served along with the most efficient costs for those services. Next slide, please. And there'll be time, I'm just going to go through each of these sections and then the discussion will be after, so please know there'll be time for questions. So as we looked, as the work group looked at the objectives that were included in the plan, there is a lot of interest. It's one of LEAGUE's goals, looking at bathroom access for folks experiencing homelessness in our community. And so there was an interest in having that specifically named within the health and safety needs bullet point of the objectives. Lots of conversation throughout the work group meeting of, are there opportunities for alignment and partnership with the business community, and also mention of the work that Act Now Lane, the Chamber of Commerce work. Is there a way that we can align those efforts together as we move these goals forward? And then additionally, the suggestion that perhaps this plan should include a goal or strategy related to a public awareness campaign, both to share the work that's being done with the community, as well as highlighting the deficiencies and the gap areas that still need work, and opportunities for the community to support those in their efforts. Next slide, please. And in the core areas of work, so starting with the first core area, the group in looking over these felt happy with these strategies and metrics, and there wasn't feedback specifically provided about these goals. There will be an opportunity for this board as the larger group reviews it to provide those that input if there is feedback. Next slide, please. And as we looked at the core area related to public and community health connections, again, similar to the sheltering definition, there was a conversation, people were pleased to see that there was a metric tied to increasing the number of medical respite beds, but wanted clarity about what is the definition of medical respite. I think we often have used varying definitions for that term, so really pulling out what's the target population we're looking to serve, who's eligible, what are the requirements of going to be of accessing those programs. And then it was highlighted by one of the work group participants who works as a peer support at an agency, that just noting that the first strategy, the establishing systematic coordination across medical, behavioral health, and homeless service providers, and then the last metric, the increase in investments in integrated supportive services, just really highlighting how important those bullet points are to the providers in our community. And I think it ties to what Chris was saying earlier about the challenges that exist at times with connecting folks to behavioral health resources. So really the work group just wanted to elevate those two as being incredibly important. And we also talked not only just in this section, but in other sections of how do we ensure that there's alignment between the municipalities, the county, and the PHB on these goals, so that we're heading in the same direction, recognizing that each municipality has their own unique challenges within their jurisdictions, and wanting to make sure that these goals are being encompassed by everyone. Next slide, please. And then in relation to the poverty and homelessness response system, again, highlighting the bathroom access piece is of importance. Similar to the previous questions around methodology, there was some interest in knowing what led to the focus on investing resources for survivors of domestic violence. It certainly was not questioning the need for that, but just wanting to know why that population was highlighted over another population, such as youth or family. So again, just seeking some clarity regarding that focus. Again, similarly, the alignment piece and ensuring that municipalities are aligned. This was specifically in reference to the bullet point number 4, the unsheltered homelessness and encampment response. Just ensuring that those strategies, are strategies that will be municipalities will be able to get behind and find common ground moving forward in those areas. And then there was a mention by a couple folks in the work group just how important those last 3 metrics are: the decrease in deaths among people experiencing homelessness, increasing successful emergency services provided to those folks, and then increase in number of institutions and community groups engaged, and just a mention that maybe those metrics should be moved higher up just to really emphasize the importance, and going back to I think what was mentioned in this meeting of really this work is about ensuring that folks experiencing homelessness are able to continue to move forward in their lives. So just wanted, the group really wanted to highlight those 3 efforts. Next slide. And then the final core area related to shelter and housing, sustainability, advocacy. Folks liked the metrics. They appreciated that the order that they were listed in. They felt like it was representative of the order that that those goals would be set in. There was a lot of conversation around whether or not there should be more of a focus in the overall plan about how we move folks on from needing to access supportive housing programs, whether that be rent assistance programs or homelessness prevention. And so a discussion of, is there room to add, a focus on move-on strategies or other ways that we can kind of help people move through the homelessness services system and move beyond it and be able to become self-sufficient without those supports. And then finally, a conversation around, I can go back really quick, just one more, sorry. A strategy that, including in the plan a strategy around, it was specifically mentioned kind of each local jurisdiction, identifying locations, properties, empty buildings within their jurisdiction that may be able to be used for housing development, shelter creation, whatever need is identified by the plan, and really those municipalities working together to, potentially create like a inventory or a registry of those properties that could be made available for those purposes. All right, final slide. So these are the things that the group identified as being missing from the plan. It felt like there was not a youth focus within the plan, and it was noted that we do have our youth homelessness demonstration project community plan, which is focused on youth, and perhaps there's an ability for those 2 plans to find some alignment. Again, an inclusion of strategies related to moving households out of the need for supportive housing. And then had mention of addressing the barriers that the households that are experiencing homelessness that are seeking these services face when entering housing. So it was specifically noted, folks that may have a criminal history that is going to keep them from being able to pass a background check when they're filling out an application, or a lack of rental history, or lack of income. So wanting to see some strategies in the plan that were more specifically focused on addressing those barriers. As I mentioned, the development of vacant properties for housing purposes within each jurisdiction. It was noted, being able to bring more landlords into our network, into our systems, and so finding ways to incentivize landlords. Specifically, we were talking about, there was mention of Houston and their use of housing vouchers, and how could we incentivize landlords in our community to want to partner to provide housing for folks with vouchers, and that seemed to be missing from this plan. And then the piece I mentioned earlier about how do we engage the community in this work, and how do we advertise the work that this board is doing, this community is doing, and how can we partner more broadly with the community to address some of those gaps that exist. And just a note kind of on the process of this development of the strategic plan, we have talked about having kind of an open house event when this plan is finalized, and that would be potentially an initial way to get some of that community engagement and then finding opportunities to move on an ongoing basis. So recognize that was a lot of information all at once. Please, any folks, I know many folks that participated in the work group are here with us today. If there's anything I missed, got wrong, any pieces you specifically want to highlight, please do so. And then I think as we move out of this discussion, just more broadly for folks that weren't a part of the work group but have looked over the plan, curious to hear input as we continue to move forward. I think Chris first. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, James, and the staff and community members who helped put this together. When I first joined the PHB with the 2016 to 2021 strategic plan, there were call-outs such as the youth shelter option, winter strategies, things of that nature, as well as an advocacy piece. I'm actually hoping that whatever we do to move forward, that we have some safeguards to where we don't just go after low-hanging fruit and leave some of the age-old questions still hanging. The late Cindy Williams brought bathroom access before league in 2018. And so it's an issue we still struggle with in this community. And as an organization that did help with local businesses, and I still get calls to this day asking for free feces cleanup from the business sector, but there's no monies or ways to support that according to the business sector. I would just like to very much highlight that if we're going to move forward with this type of planning, that we hold each part equitable and engageable. When we did the TAC report, we did a lot of focus on the PR items, but we did not actually get a lot of the fact-finding or myth-busting items sorted. And so I hope that as we do this community engagement, that we actually even look at possibly having PR folks who can actively engage more often with the community, because rumor mills are rumor mills, and it's a lot harder to backtrack false information than it is to spread the appropriate information. Also would like to see more of a carve out for regional supports. A lot of the rural people have to come to Eugene to get help, and so trying to see if we can reintegrate one of the old caveats from the original strategic plan that I knew, to have more regional-based and community-based housing. Final thing is one of the things that I keep running into is that our systems will rule out people who qualify for something even if they can't access it, whether it's sponsors type of housing for people with felonies or whether there's families with children's supports. And so if we're going to diversify our approach and the strategies that we are looking at, how do we get people into immediate processes instead of waiting on a list that never moves? Thank you for your time and your service and your hard work on this, James.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That's helpful feedback. I also feel like I should have mentioned kind of where we're at in the process here, moving this forward. So work group, as I said, convened on Friday with the plan to bring their input to this board today, solicit further input from the broader board. There also will be a survey. So Brittany has created a survey that I'll send out as follow-up to this meeting. As you all are able to review the full draft plan that was included in the packet, Brittany strongly encourages you all to fill out that survey, and that's going to be the best way to provide direct feedback to her that she can then implement in the draft. The goal will then be to have the work group reconvene when that's been completed, put eyes on a final draft that incorporates all of the feedback of all of the entities, and then bring that to the PHB for final approval. So we're still in the middle of the feedback collection phase. So there's lots of opportunities to continue to provide input, and that was really valuable input, Chris. So other folks have questions, thoughts? Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to respond to I anticipated some of Chris's comments, and therefore I have a little bit of a response to that. Chris always brings forward some really interesting observations that we really need to pay close attention to. One thing that he mentioned was spending time on things that do not move. So I think we all would agree that we'd like things to move. We'd like to do things and feel that the time we spend at this table and the rest of the time that we spend away from this table, our boots on the ground, is something that really is moving the ball uphill, moving the needle. And finding ways to do that in a way that is tangible to the multi-jurisdictions that are represented here. This is a multi-jurisdictional body. We're represented by the mayor of Eugene is here today. The mayor of Springfield is here today. We have elected officials from throughout the county, including the sheriff, but we also have the people who are actually doing the work on the ground right here at this table with us. It's very valuable to be able to determine what can we do, to not just talk about it, not just sit at this table, talk about it, go home, do our regular day's worth of work, which sometimes pertains to the work of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, just coincidentally maybe, and sometimes it doesn't. And then we come back and talk about it again and not really indicate how far we've gone. So I think as we move through our strategic plan, I'm excited about identifying things that we can report the progress so we can, each of us, take back to our home bodies, whatever our home body may be, and say, look what we did. It doesn't have to be bragging, it's just an indication as to what it is that we've done. And I think one thing that we've all talked about, and Chris just reiterated it, is toilets. Pretty simple, isn't it? Can we count how many toilets are available in Eugene, in Springfield, in Oak Ridge, in Florence, and places in between? I think we can do that. And can we identify ways to open more toilets and then report when that happens? Seems pretty simple. It's a simple and easy to track metric that we can take home to our constituents or constituencies and say, hey, look what we did. We opened 3 toilets this month. Not a big deal, but it is in that it's progress. And I'm hoping that we can find lots and lots of gems of progress of that nature as we move forward with our strategic plan. Sometimes you might call it tactics, sometimes you might call it tactical work, but making sure that when Mayor Knudsen goes back to the city council and when Mayor Van Gordon goes back to his city council, he can say, you have sent me to the Poverty and Homelessness Board and this is what I'm bringing back. I love that thought.
I do want to say I look back at the progress, and I remember when we did Operation 600, where we thought, this is going to do it. I mean, in our brains, we were like, if we could get 600 units, oh, wow, that's going to make a dent. And then I saw the strategic plan to say, oh, we actually have more than that. And then I looked at the numbers, and I was like, but, oh, between the time it took us to build what we thought we needed 6 years ago, the issue has almost tripled. And so I know sometimes it feels disheartening because as we're bringing up putting new resources and services out there, there becomes more need. And so I think that piece, and then we looked at the TAC report and what we thought we needed, and then Governor Kotek's analysis came out about how much housing and resources we needed. And it's like, whoa, that's like, that's like 10 times more than what we thought. So I think it's important to celebrate and highlight those accomplishments so that we don't get lost in how much we have accomplished. And yes, we still have a lot more to accomplish. And there's a lot of things that have happened in those past 6 to 8 years that I don't think any of us thought were going to happen, which has actually made the problem worse for our community. And so we do know that we have a lot of work to do, but I think highlighting those small accomplishments and what we have accomplished, and the piece with, bringing in the business community and nonprofits and other people who are developing housing, so that we can get a full picture of what's happening in our community. Because at the PHB, we're looking at a lot of what we're what we're supporting and how we support within the PHB, but there's a lot of other good work that's happening out there that we have yet to be able to capture and bring back and give a voice to. So think that piece throughout the plan of how do we bring all of that together, so.
And I think, Chair, to maintain the fortitude to do the vast amount of work ahead of us, we realize that we're not wasting our energy. We are making progress. And we have new faces at the table. And I'm looking directly at you, Mayor Knudsen. You can't tell it, but I am. And you've done so much work prior to being elected mayor that really is akin to the work that we do at the Poverty and Homelessness Board. So not all of the work that is specifically done by this board is done by the members of this board directly, but we can inform, and Mayor Knudsen, if you have a way to talk about this, inform the work of the other initiatives around town, whether it be, whatever those may be. And once again, Mayor Knudsen, I've watched you with admiration through the years as you've addressed middle housing and some of the really meaty issues that surround our issues.
I will jump in after the commissioner's comments. Thank you, Commissioner Farr. That was very, very kind of the compliments that you offered. I also just want to flag for the people in Harris Hall, those of us who are Zooming in are having a little bit of a hard time hearing different speakers. So please just speak closely to your microphone if you can, and we'll be sure to catch the conversation through the Zoom. It's wonderful to have this option to be both together and also remote. I have a handful of different pieces of feedback. I want to start with my appreciation to the Poverty and Homelessness Board staff and all of the work that has gone into getting us to this point for this conversation, because it does feel like, as many people have observed, this document and especially the opportunity to really focus on the systems improvements and operational improvements, that collaborative structure really speaks to the heart of the Poverty and Homelessness Board's purpose. And so there's a lot of potential there that I just really want to appreciate and I see as being powerful work and potentially very influential work that is identified by this plan and that also connects to work plans and that importantly also has capacity that is attached. It may not be as much as capacity as we need in order to accomplish and go as far as these goals or go as far as we would like to go, but there's existing capacity that is here at the table with us to be able to bring to bear on those areas of work. So wanted to start by appreciating that. The rest of my comments on the draft strategic plan and following up on our discussions from the work group. They're at a handful of different elevations, and so I hope these are helpful to Brittany, our consultant, who's working on assembling this plan. First of all, at a very high level, I think that it is important that this strategic plan, reflecting the Poverty and Homelessness Board's landscape view of our community's needs, that it outline and reflect the work that is needed to address the challenges of poverty and homelessness in our community, not just an expression of how we will allocate the capacity that we have, but a description of the work that is needed, because that will help us as different jurisdictions to have a clear understanding of where our efforts fit into a larger successful effort, and also to know where it is that we really need to lean in if we want to see more progress against some of these challenges. And so that is a high-level piece of feedback that I think there's still some work that we can do on this draft to communicate that clearly, I think, but I appreciate that as a purpose of this strategic plan, to get really a picture of what's needed, clearly illustrated for us as a collection of communities and also elected officials and community leaders. I do think that in the plan, connected to that, there is a lot of detail, especially into the work plans, that is ambitious and that raises questions about how it is that we will do that work. Again, I think it's critical to capture that need, but I think also for this plan to be as useful as possible, for there to be an additional sorting that occurs within the work plans or within the strategic plan core document itself that helps to clarify who is being imagined as working on each of these different issues, so that then jurisdictions can cross-reference that with the work that they're actually doing and have funding to to address, and we can again have a clear picture of how progress will be made. So that's one piece, a clarification between both the plan and the work plans as to who might be doing what. And in some cases, it's everyone. In some cases, it's really one lead entity with others supporting. In some cases, it might really be focused on one entity, to be determined. But that's something that I would love to hear from our consultant about. Related to that, I also think that this document and the trajectory it's outlining would be more clear if the work plans also continually tracked back to the key objectives that are identified at the beginning of the plan. And that is something that is a little bit challenging in how it is that, you're sort of navigating between these two different documents and the metrics that they lay out. As an aside to that, I also just want to note that the document itself, this will seem granular, but I actually think it's very important because of the communication role that this document has to play. The document itself, in both, I think both its readability and legibility could be much better. And by that, what I mean is I think the format of the document being set up in landscape format with some of these very long lines of text makes it difficult to read, just as for just typical people, but also that the lack of kind of graphic wayfinding within the document or even type hierarchy that's consistent with the importance of the information being shared, that again makes it a little bit harder to decipher as a guiding document. So I hope that would be also helpful feedback to Brittany. I have a lot more thoughts about different action items, and my interpretation is that the action items within the work plans have done a really excellent job of capturing the outreach and feedback loops that this planning process has included. And also, I think it's important that too is connected to our different jurisdictions and milled through a process of identifying, like, if you were responsible for advancing this priority and this strategy, would these be the action items you would take? Or would it be another set of action items that are based on best practices or based on other information expected to be more effective? That's just a question I had reading this document. And then lastly, and I'm sorry because this is a long comment, but I want to be sure to offer this feedback now while it could be useful. Thinking about our community's goals related to poverty and homelessness and the possibility of achieving functional zero in Lane County, in our communities, in our cities. From what I have understood from following Built to Zero's work and Community Solutions, other organizations and places that have been successful in moving that needle, there has been a really clear focus on different populations. Veterans homelessness obviously being one that is well known, but also homeless children or children and families. And so some of the detail that came to mind in discussions about this draft plan is that with our families and children who are homeless, that we have a significant majority of those children and family who are unsheltered. And that as a population focus could be one where we have a real opportunity to move the needle through some coordinated efforts across different jurisdictions, and also one that has many downstream consequences and harms that we could mitigate through earlier intervention. So that's one other piece in this plan that I would love to see lifted up or have further discussions with this board about, why it is that might be a worthy area to emphasize, but it I think is very important to our progress and the strategies that might be involved and the levers that could be brought to bear, I think are unique also when trying to work with that particular population. So those are my thoughts, and I wanted to be sure to share them. Thank you again for all of the work to put this together.
Thank you. I think that, Mike?
Thank you. As usual, I will mention homeless prevention. I really am worried about funding. The last 2 years have been very difficult for providers in this area. There's been so much focus on shelter at the state level, and I'm totally supportive of that. But I know that our funding has not been keeping up, and we've really been struggling and relying more and more on grants, which are wonderful, but it makes your funding future in question. And so, as the poor staff at the county know, I am that squeaky wheel that brings these sorts of issues up, and I really appreciate their patience. But I'm wondering if advocacy on all levels is something that should also be a focus. Advocacy with our state and federal funders. To remember that homeless prevention is much less expensive and I think much more successful. And I think that there needs to be some emphasis in here. And I mean, we are mentioned in this document, which is wonderful. Thank you. But it's most of the focus in this document's around, other areas. And I just want to make sure we give some equal time to prevention. Those are kind of my thoughts. I don't know what the answer is, of course, in our current funding future, but I think we always need to keep hope that we'll be able to continue to operate. Anyway, thank you.
I'd love to hear from anybody else, but a couple of quick responses. It'll be very, very quick. First to Mayor Knudsen. Boy, spot on about different populations, identifying different populations and moving the needle perhaps more rapidly. We have evidence of that with Operation 365, which housed 404 homeless veteran families in 1 year, focusing specifically on veterans because people had a clearer picture. I think you're bringing a good understanding of that to the table, Mayor Knudsen. And some of the things that you pointed out, I'd love to talk more in depth and bring it to this table because we have efforts underway and reinvigorating, refreshing, and making certain that we're all paying attention to the progress that's being made. I thank you for your very specific mention of that. The other thing I'd like to mention is as Mike Fleck talks about prevention and other elements, we don't often talk about all in Lane County and the dashboard and the things that are doing that are happening through all in Lane County. And I'm opening the dashboard right now, and on prevention, we served 196 households over the course of, I believe it's the last year, in prevention. And in diversion, 320 households in diversion, which go to the points that Mike is making, that it's cheaper to keep people in housing than to find people housing once they're out. So I think making certain that I don't know, James, can you talk about the dashboard a little bit? Is that something that we can elevate even more than we do?
Yeah, and I think I actually appreciate you bringing that up because it was something that was mentioned in the work group as well. I think were any of the strategies and successes found through All In incorporated in the plan with Brittany? And I don't know that answer, but I think that's an important thing to look at. Yeah, I mean, I think with what I have found to be beneficial about the dashboard is it can be that talking point. It can be that way of communicating out to, the average citizen, kind of what work is being done in a way that's easy for them to grasp. So I think if there's, an opportunity to convey similarly in the strategic plan what this board's goals are and how they're going to be met, and then measuring those successes through, maybe it is a similar dashboard that's tied to the work of the PHP. I don't know, but I think we've seen value in that dashboard in being able to kind of tell the story of how the funds are being used and the goals that we're seeing with them. I'm not sure I'm answering your question exactly, but
no, I think you nailed it. And I think understanding that as the Poverty and Homelessness Board, while we do have a broad umbrella, we aren't responsible for everything, and we aren't the ones that actually are the arbiters on every single item. However, we can be a coordinating body that gives both acknowledgement and encouragement to other agencies to cooperate and make sure that we're all working together. As Mayor Knudsen has pointed out, and as others have pointed out, the more we work together, the more 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 when you're working together.
Yeah. And I do that brings up something that the MAC group, the All In MAC group had talked last month about, potentially there is a future where there's more direct alignment between the PHB and the MAC group. We've seen that in other jurisdictions across the state, as MAC groups have kind of blended in with COCs in other parts of the state. And I do think that there could be alignment between those two entities because the work is very similar, obviously, and the goals are similar. So, yeah, I think there is that ability moving forward if that's a goal that this board has.
Mm-hmm. And that was robust of the MAC group. We serve the same people. We serve the same populations, and we're trying to achieve the same goals, which is putting people into housing and bringing people through and out of poverty. So I love coordinating the efforts in that fashion.
I think that's come up in several groups. I'm not quite sure how, we've talked about that back and forth of how do we highlight what's in the public domain and what we're doing with those funds, but also how the efforts of private entities and nonprofits are also, and how can we bring all of that together so that when numbers are presented, it doesn't look like we're doing like that much. I mean, because we have continuum of care funding, and continuum of care funding alongside, Medicaid funding, other funding are all contributing to try to help with prevention and to get people in the housing. But we don't have a way to share that big picture with the community. And so I think for folks, sometimes they get frustrated because they're looking at the PHB to say, we need all of this housing and that's all gonna come from the county. But all of those are gonna be private and public partnerships. Some is gonna be low income, some affordable, some not. There's gonna be housing developers and others, but we don't have a way to align what is going on in our community from a variety of groups into one thing to say this is how our entire community is working together to address these issues. Oh, yes. Go ahead.
I'll just add to that. Thank you, Chair, for framing it in that way, because I think that is one of the bridges that this new strategic plan could offer that then really operates as a catalyst for ground truthing, so to speak, work at the jurisdictional level that then can feed back into a plan and help us to better understand where it is that we need to focus efforts, or if there are opportunities that we're not seeing because we are painting this entire picture, but then only able to implement a certain portion or in different pieces, but never doing that loop closing portion of the exercise. And that may have occurred. I do not at all mean that to say that that work has not happened previously, but in thinking about the work we will need to do going forward, I think that similar type of feedback loop will be a really important part of this plan's utility within different jurisdictions. So I'm not sure if staff have recommendations for how it is that we might coordinate that level of review and continued discussion, but I think it would be incredibly helpful what you're describing.
And I would also say I'd like it on the strategic plan, not necessarily that I want you guys to do it. That's not what I'm saying, because I don't think, because I think you guys are just one piece, so I don't want people to feel like, okay, we're going to throw this. I think it's something that maybe as a community we could put down as the Poverty and Homelessness Board of how we can bring all these partners to the table to share all that information. Not that I want you guys to do it. All right, did we have other comment? I'm sorry, Chris, I know you're typing something. I cannot see because of the glare.
I can read it. Will this plan also consider regional advocacy for outcomes that set back the plan, such as the Johnson versus Grants Pass? And yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. and good feedback. You know, the plan doesn't include it now, but I could certainly see the value of it. So again, just to highlight next steps, I will get you all a survey out as follow-up to this meeting. Again, really encourage you to submit your feedback. And Mayor, I appreciate the comments you made, that even if it's just as simple as, you know, the layout of the document or the verbiage used, I think Brittany is looking for that kind of feedback as well too. So you'll get that survey, and then we'll continue this work with the work group after Brittany's been able to incorporate some of that feedback, and just really appreciate all of your ongoing effort to get us a final plan.
And James, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what is our guesstimate at our ETA of when we think we would be able to have enough feedback to present what we feel like would be the final draft?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it depends a little bit on the amount of feedback that comes in through the surveying process. You know, I think we've gotten a lot of great feedback in the work group and here, but there's, you know, always folks that are going to contribute in ways that aren't quite as public, I think. But our goal would be no later than the June all-member meeting. Yeah.
But it is imperative on everybody reading the document draft that we have and getting your feedback in from the survey ASAP.
Yes.
So that Brittany can move forward as quickly as possible with incorporating the feedback into a final document.
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you. All right. Feel like we are. Any other quick comments before we move on to committee updates? Okay, all right, thank you. Hopefully everyone had time to read the committee updates. Do we have any questions? Nope, okay. All right. Well, look at us. We might actually get out of here a little bit early today. As I wrap up, I do want to thank everyone for attending today and being patient with my poor eyesight and your feedback about the strategic plan. And I encourage, please bring as much feedback as we want, because we want this to be a plan that we all feel is the PHB that we can move forward, that we can present to the community, and that really feels workable of what we need. With our next steps, James is the survey will come out in regards to the strategic plan, so get your feedback in. Also, please remember that the chair e-vote will be going out. And I do believe it is standard with Robert's rules that when we do a vote electronically, everybody who is a voting member has to vote. We can't just do majority when we're doing something online. So please do get those back. Otherwise, we're going to have to put it on the agenda again to actually vote in the meeting to move it forward. And I'm trying to, okay, this is where the staff helps me out, because I
think we're on.
Is that what we have with wrap up?
That's what
Did I miss anything?
Nope, I think you got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did anybody have anything that they would want to consider for the next board agenda? All member. Nope. Okay. Well, as we wrap up and before I hit the gavel, just know if you have agenda items, you can send those to James. I am going to say he has to do that part. Because that does, if you have things you want us to talk about, that is one way to make sure that when we're developing the board agenda, that we have your feedback about what to add to the next agenda. So I know we have conversations before the meeting, after the meeting, during the meeting. As you can tell, I go in waves here with what stays in my brain. So for my sake, please send an email to James if there's something that you want to make sure that we talk about and get on the agenda. So outside of that, I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you all next month. Meeting adjourned.